poor student, burdened with the responsibility of caring for his ailing mother and an insurmountable medical debt, was forced to make an unexpected decision to marry a woman 50 years his senior, despite not loving her. But just weeks later, Vivian's sudden death would change everything, pushing Luca into an unimaginable responsibility. Subscribe to the channel now and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Luca Moretti sat silently in an old wooden chair in the dim, quiet room. The faint glow from the hanging light above cast shadows across a desk piled high with papers, bills, prescriptions, and hospital documents scattered everywhere, each sheet a harsh reminder of his despair. He stared at them with a hollow gaze, his heart heavy under the weight of a burden that seemed impossible to bear. The sudden death of his father had shattered everything like a house crumbling under its own weight, and now, at just 22, Luca was the sole pillar of his family, facing responsibilities far too large for anyone to fully understand. He sighed, feeling as if his shoulders might snap from the pressure. His mother, Giulia Moretti, lay in a small bed in the corner of the room. She suffered from severe diabetes, her body growing weaker by the day. Her silver hair clung to her gaunt face, her hands trembling as she tried to lift a bowl of food, dry as withered twigs. Luca couldn't forget the day his father passed. Everything had changed overnight. And now he was the only one who could care for his family, but his meager part-time job barely covered the costs. The medical bills never stopped, flooding in like relentless waves crashing against the shore. Every month they piled up, never ending. Luca knew that if he didn't find a way out, things would only get worse. He looked at his mother, his eyes filled with sorrow. Giulia had once said she wouldn't survive without her medications, but Luca didn't know what to do except borrow money from friends and pray for a miracle. And now his miracles. Luca bit his lip, trying to suppress the rising sense of hopelessness. He couldn't allow himself to give in. Each day that passed was another. He managed to survive the struggles, but the exhaustion and fear dragged him down like an unrelenting tide. He couldn't let his mother suffer any longer. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Luca jumped, quickly wiping his hands on his worn-out clothes before standing up. He walked toward the door, anxiety rising within him. What could be waiting for him out there? Luca stepped out into the night air, feeling the chill of the evening. As he blinked, he saw a woman standing by the door. Petite, with silver hair and sharp, discerning eyes. She wore an elegant outfit, but there was something about her that suggested she hadn't left her home in a while. "Sorry, can I help you?" Luca asked, his voice tense. He hadn't shaken the uneasy feeling from the dim room where the weight of his family's struggles pressed down on him. "You must be Luca Moretti," the woman said, her voice gentle but commanding. Luca nodded, still unsure of what was happening. Since his father's passing, everything had become uncertain. Why would someone like Vivian Clark seek him out? Just a poor student, son of a struggling family? It didn't make sense. "Hello, I'm Vivian Clark," she said. "I've heard about you from a few friends and am very impressed by your determination. I hope I'm not bothering you, but I'd like to invite you to a fundraising event this weekend. There will be many people from the business world there, and I think you could play an important role in it." Luca was taken aback, unsure how to respond. A wealthy woman like Vivienne Clark knew about him, a man still fighting day by day to survive? But with nothing left to lose, he decided to go. He needed to do whatever he could to change his life. The event was held at a large mansion, its driveway lined with luxury cars. Luca felt as if he'd stepped into a completely different world, a world of wealth and power. He felt like an outsider, a stranger among those who seemed so at ease. Self-consciousness washed over him each time he walked past the cold, dismissive gazes of those around him. Even though Vivienne introduced him to a few people, he couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong. As Luca tried to join a conversation with a group, a middle-aged man glanced him up and down before sneering. "Who exactly are you to be standing here with us?" the man scoffed. "You're just a poor student. How could you understand this world?" Luca felt the tension rise, but he didn't have a strong reply. The words stung deeply, like a slap to his dignity, intensifying his sense of alienation. Though others didn't speak, their looks made it clear he was an outsider in a world he couldn't fit into. Vivian quickly noticed Luca's discomfort and ushered him into another room where a more pleasant conversation was taking place, but Luca still felt trapped. Everything seemed so far beyond his reach, like standing on the other side of a door he couldn't open. "Let me introduce you to Luca, a young man with a heart of gold," Vivian said, her eyes proud. Luca managed to smile, but he couldn't shake the awkwardness that came with the curious gazes directed his way. The feeling of being a mere accessory in the game of the rich only made his sense of isolation worse. After a few hours, Vivian led Luca outside into the garden, where the lights from the lamps reflected off the pond, creating a tranquil scene. But to Luca, it only deepened the loneliness in his heart. "I've actually known about you for a while," Vivian said, her voice growing serious. "You remind me of myself when I was younger. My family didn't have much money, but I fought to build my career. I see a strong spirit in you, something very few people have." Luca listened in silence, not quite understanding where this was going. Vivian's eyes locked onto his with a deep, knowing gaze. "That's why I have a proposition for you, one that could change your life. After I pass, I want you to take over my charity. The foundation will support people in need like your mother, but there's a condition. You have to marry." Luca stood frozen, as if everything around him had come to a halt. "What? What do you say?" Vivian smiled softly, but there was a determination in her eyes that Luca had never seen before. "I don't want the foundation to fall into the hands of those seeking to profit. I want it to continue helping people in need, like you, and I know you won't squander this opportunity. All I need is a successor, and I believe you're the only one who can do this." Luca still couldn't believe what he had just heard, an unexpected offer, one not just of money and power, but also a relationship he couldn't even imagine. But then, as he looked into Vivian's eyes, he sensed the sincerity in her words. He didn't know if he could accept her offer, but one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. "Thank you," Luca said quietly, his voice heavy. "I need some time to think." Vivian simply smiled as though she already knew his answer. "Take your time. This is an opportunity not everyone gets." After the unexpected meeting with Vivian Clark, Luca wandered through the long, lonely night. Her words echoed in his mind like a melody he couldn't erase. She told him that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, that if he turned it down, he would remain stuck in poverty and would never be able to change his mother's life. But Luca's heart struggled to accept the decision he felt was like selling himself to save his family. His family's old, worn-out house felt like a weight pressing down on him. With every step he took, with every decision he faced, Luca could feel the burden on his shoulders. His mother still lay motionless on the sickbed, her strength fading. Her frail body could barely speak, only weak breaths and dull eyes watching him, as if following every move he made. The mounting medical debt and the endless days of not knowing how to afford her medication made Luca feel cornered, with no way out. He kept replaying Vivian's words. "Marry me, take over my charity, this is your chance to save your family, and you won't have to worry about the future." Her voice haunted him like an incessant reminder. But there were too many unanswered questions. Could he accept a life that felt foreign to him while wrestling with a sense that he was doing something wrong? Was he sacrificing his freedom just for an offer that might have hidden agendas? That night, Luca couldn't sleep. He paced back and forth in his room, wondering if he could turn down her proposal. But then his mind returned to his mother. Those long days when she suffered from endless pain, her body too weak to fight anymore. She couldn't keep going much longer, and if Luca didn't act now, everything would come to an end soon. Could he stand by and watch her die like this? No, he couldn't let that happen. He had to do something. He had to act now. Luca knew he couldn't continue on this path alone. He had once dreamed of a better future, but it seemed every door was closed. There was no way he could chase his dreams under the current circumstances. Vivian Clark, with all her wealth and influence, could be the key to solving it all. Yet the price to pay felt enormous. As he thought about it, Luca couldn't help but wonder, could his life really change just by marrying Vivian? He would step into a new life, but would it truly be his own? Or was he simply replacing one existence with another, one that would allow him to survive in a challenging world? The next morning, Luca decided to visit a close friend, someone who had always been by his side during the toughest times. He went to see Antonio, his childhood friend, the one person who had helped him through his darkest hours. Antonio listened with a worried look, not saying a word as Luca explained everything. When Luca finished, Antonio finally spoke. "This is a big decision, Luca. Are you sure this is what you want? You can't just think about your family without considering yourself. Your career, your happiness, everything will change. You won't be the same person anymore." Luca lowered his head, a deep pain taking over him. He knew Antonio was right, but maybe this was the only choice. "I have no other option. My mother can't wait any longer. I have to do something." Antonio looked at him with a worried expression, then sighed. "If that's the decision you've made, I can't stop you. But remember, no matter what, I'm still here. You'll always have me." Luca thanked Antonio, and with his mind made up, he returned to Vivian later that afternoon. She greeted him with her usual soft smile, as if she had already known the outcome of their conversation. Vivian led him to a quiet corner of the garden, where the warmth of the setting sun bathed the space, filling it with a gentle serenity, but also an eerie stillness. Luca looked at her, and once again the questions swirling in his mind resurfaced. But this time, he had an answer. "I agree. I will marry you, and I will take over your charity." Vivian didn't seem surprised. She just smiled, as though she had been expecting these words for a long time. "I knew you'd choose this path. You're not just doing it for your family, but for yourself, too. You'll see that this is an opportunity very few people ever get." Luca felt like a door was opening before him, but at the same time he knew his life would never be the same. He was stepping into a completely different world, one where the challenges and responsibilities would weigh heavily on him, but deep down, Luca knew this was his only chance to change his fate and save his family from the darkness they had been living in. And no matter how difficult the road ahead might be, Luca was ready to face it. On the first day Luca stepped into Vivian Clark's mansion, he felt as though he had entered an entirely different world, one he had never dared to dream of. The mansion sat atop a hill, surrounded by lush green trees and an expansive garden that seemed straight out of a movie. The elegant cream-colored walls, classical paintings, and luxurious armchairs created an atmosphere that resembled a grand castle. Every step Luca took on the cold stone floors of the mansion echoed, reminding him of the vast difference between the life he once knew and the life he now found himself in. Vivian, now his wife, guided him through the mansion's vast hallways with a calm, confident demeanor. She wore a tailored suit, her silver hair gleaming under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. Though she was older, there was an undeniable grace and power in every movement she made. "You'll learn a lot here," Vivienne said, her voice soft yet filled with strength. "This mansion isn't just where you'll live, it's where you'll learn how to run my charity and ensure that the values I've built will endure." Luca nodded, still unable to shake the feeling of unfamiliarity. He couldn't get used to the opulence surrounding him. Every object, every piece of furniture seemed like a symbol of wealth and power, making him feel like a stranger in his own home. But Vivian didn't let him feel isolated for long. She began introducing him to her work. Each day, Luca attended meetings, got to know the charity's staff, and learned about the projects Vivian had built over the past 50 years. Though he was just starting, he could already sense the gravity and importance of the work Vivian had dedicated her life to. Her charity didn't just provide financial support for the poor, it also helped orphaned children, families affected by natural disasters, and homeless individuals. Vivienne didn't just use her wealth to change lives. She instilled the human values she believed in. One afternoon, after a long meeting, Vivienne took Luca into the mansion's library. The room was lined with towering bookshelves filled with valuable antique books. Standing in front of a massive bookshelf, Vivienne turned to Luca and said, "This is where I seek knowledge, where I learn about life. These books have taught me that wealth isn't the most important thing in life. What matters is what we can do for others." Luca listened intently. He had never imagined that someone as wealthy as Vivienne would spend so much time learning about these humanistic values. These lessons were so different from the survival mindset he had lived with, where each day was a battle just to make it through, to avoid the trap of poverty. "We can't change the world if we don't understand and feel the pain of others," Vivienne continued, her voice deep with conviction. "Every action we take can create change. I've spent my life helping those less fortunate than I. You'll understand that when you truly engage with the charity's work." Luca felt a shift inside him. Though he still wrestled with the contradiction of living in such luxury while working with the wealthy, he began to see the difference between people like Vivienne and those who only sought to enrich themselves. Vivienne wasn't just a wealthy woman. She was someone with a big heart, using her assets to help those with nothing. Luca realized that if he took over her work, he too could make a difference for people like his mother, for the poor, for those in need. Day by day, Luca learned from Vivienne how to run the charity, manage finances, and, most importantly, how to uphold the humanistic values she had spent years building. He attended meetings with partners, reviewed the charity's projects, and learned about the people it helped. Occasionally, Vivienne would take him outside the mansion to visit those the charity supported. These trips made Luca realize that Vivienne's work wasn't just charity. It was a mission, a way to transform entire communities. Although there was still much for Luca to learn, he began to understand the weight of the responsibility Vivienne had passed on to him. He wasn't just taking over a large charity, he was becoming part of a legacy of compassion that Vivienne had created. He felt as though he was standing at the edge of a great opportunity, but also a great challenge. One evening, as they sat together at the large dining table in the mansion, Vivienne looked at Luca and smiled. "You're starting to understand the work now, aren't you?" Luca met her gaze, a mix of relief and resolve in his heart. "I'm beginning to understand, and I want to give everything I have to honor what you've built." Vivienne nodded, her eyes filled with trust. "You'll do it, and I know that one day you'll make this charity even stronger. You'll be the one to carry on what I've started." Luca looked at Vivienne, his heart full of emotion. Though his life had changed completely, he knew that he had found a new purpose, a reason to keep fighting, not just for his family, but for those he could help in the future. In the early days at Vivienne Clark's mansion, Luca felt as though he had been thrown into an unexpected downpour. His previous life seemed like an entirely different world compared to what he was facing now. The work at Vivienne's charity was both confusing and overwhelming. He had the opportunity, but it wasn't an easy path. Just a few weeks after officially taking the reins of the foundation, Luca began to feel the pressure, both from within himself and from others. One morning after a long meeting, Luca received an email from the charity's board of directors. The message wasn't long, but it was clear there was strong resistance. The board members doubted his ability to lead. They didn't say it outright, but the sharp questions about Luca's experience and background made him feel as though he were under siege. One question stood out. Does Luca have the ability and knowledge to manage such a large organization as this charity? These questions didn't just flood the meeting. They lingered in Luca's mind long into the night. Luca sat in his office chair, hands resting on the desk, staring at the computer screen without really seeing it. He thought back to the early days when Vivienne gave him this opportunity. She had said he would be the successor, that he could do it. But now, faced with the resistance from those with more experience, Luca began to doubt himself. He had once been a poor student with no solid foundation in business or charitable work. How could he lead a large organization, a charity that impacted thousands of lives? Every day, Luca tried to motivate himself. but the self-doubt and feelings of inadequacy clung to him. He remembered Vivian's words, her lessons on perseverance and responsibility. But deep down, he couldn't shake the question. Did he really deserve this opportunity? One morning, Vivian invited Luca to the living room where the sunlight streamed through the large windows, filling the space with warmth. She sat in her favorite armchair, her gaze still sharp, but filled with kindness. "You seem tense," Vivian said, her voice gentle but full of concern. "What's going on, Luca?" Luca didn't know where to begin. He felt as though he was standing before an insurmountable mountain, and the doubts in his mind were growing bigger by the day. I'm not sure I can do this," Luca admitted, his voice trembling. "So many people doubt me. The questions about my abilities. I don't have enough experience." Vivian looked at him closely, her eyes not filled with judgment or worry but with understanding and patience. She gently placed her hand on his, a warm gesture that seemed to calm him. "Luca, I know this is a big challenge, but don't forget why I chose you. I didn't choose you for what you've done in the past. I chose you because I believe in your heart, and more than that, I believe you have the ability to learn. This isn't about experience, it's about perseverance and sincerity." Luca looked at Vivian, feeling as though she was seeing straight into his soul. "But when I'm facing people with more experience, I feel like I'm not capable. I'm afraid I'll make mistakes, that I'll fail." Vivian smiled, but there was something deeply reassuring in her eyes. "Everyone starts from zero, Luca. No one is born the best, and no one achieves success without facing failure. What matters is that you learn from each failure and never give up. I've been through many challenges. Many times I doubted myself, but I didn't quit. And you won't either. You'll not only learn from your mistakes, but from the people around you." Luca felt a sense of relief begin to spread through his mind. Vivian's words were like a light illuminating the dark path in his heart, but even so, he couldn't deny that the resistance from the board was still a major challenge. He needed to prove that he could lead this charity, that he could overcome the doubts and do the job well. The next day, Luca decided he had to do something to change the situation. He called a meeting with the key members of the board. Although he still had doubts about his own abilities, he knew that if he didn't stand firm, everything would fall apart. He couldn't disappoint Vivian, couldn't let the charity fall into the hands of people who cared only about their own interests. As the meeting began, Luca stood up, his eyes fixed on the board members. He could feel the tension in the room. But he knew this was his moment to prove himself. "Hello, everyone," Luca began, his voice steady. "I understand that you have doubts about my abilities. I don't have years of experience in this field, but there's one thing I believe you'll see in me. I have passion, and I am committed to Vivian Clark's mission. I'm not here to make things easy. I'm here to work with you to make real changes." Luca paused, feeling his nerves rising, but he didn't let the anxiety take over. "I believe in the work we do here, and I know that if we work together, we will overcome these challenges." A few members of the board exchanged glances, some furrowed their brows, others nodded seriously. But Luca wouldn't let himself be defeated. He continued, "This charity isn't just about money. It's about the people, the families who need our help, and I will do everything I can to ensure that we don't let them down." Finally, after a long silence, one of the board members stood up, his eyes bright. "I see your enthusiasm and commitment. We will need change, and perhaps you're the one to help us make that happen." Luca felt a wave of relief wash over him. He knew the road ahead would still be difficult, but at least now he had earned the respect of part of the board, and more importantly, he had proven to himself that he could overcome self-doubt and stand tall. When the meeting ended, Luca returned to his office feeling like a weight had been lifted. He looked out the window where the afternoon light was slowly fading. He realized that he was no longer the insecure young man he had been. Now he was a leader, someone who would carry forward Vivian's legacy. And he knew that no matter how many challenges lay ahead, He would never give up. Luca stood in front of his desk in his office, his eyes scanning the files and documents that needed his attention that day. Though he had proven some of his capabilities in the previous meeting, a lingering sense of anxiety still clung to him. The board members of the charity still hadn't fully trusted him, and their resistance simmered beneath the surface, even if it wasn't spoken aloud. Luca understood that he would have to prove himself, not just to them, but to himself as well. He had to show that he could do this job, that he could bring real change to the people who needed help. In the days that followed, Luca made the decision to focus on smaller projects, ones where he could create concrete, measurable changes. He couldn't just sit back and wait for change to trickle down from above. He needed to work hard himself, starting with the smallest tasks. These small projects were not only a way to build trust with the board, but also an opportunity for him to learn more about the communities the charity was supporting. One project Luca chose to take on was helping poor families in an outer city neighborhood where many people lived in makeshift homes without basic amenities. He visited one of the families in the area, a family with 3 children living in difficult conditions. As he entered the modest home, Luca felt the weight of their poverty, not just through the cracked walls and sagging roof, but in the eyes of the women of the house. The mother, Maria, greeted Luca with a kind smile, despite the hardships she faced. "Thank you to the charity for helping our family," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. "We don't know what we would do without your help." Luca could feel the exhaustion in her voice, and it was then that he truly understood the significance of the small projects he was working on. A new stove, a few bags of rice, or free classes for the children might not change these families' lives overnight, but it gave them hope and peace of mind in their everyday lives. He spent more time talking to Maria and her children, listening to their stories, the struggles they faced, the dreams they hadn't yet achieved. Each story made Luca more determined, more persistent, because he knew that if he didn't do something, no one would change the fate of these people. He promised himself that the charity wouldn't just provide material support, but would also bring real, lasting change to their lives. Visiting these impoverished communities became a great source of motivation for Luca. Whenever he felt discouraged, he remembered families like Maria's, people who needed help to get through their struggles. Luca didn't just want to help them financially, he wanted to bring them new opportunities to stand on their own. He began planning vocational training courses, skill-building programs, and job creation activities for the poor. He knew that only when these people could become self-sufficient, when they could generate income for themselves, would they truly escape the grip of poverty. Though the resistance from the board had not completely disappeared, Luca gradually gained the trust of those around him. They saw him working tirelessly, continually learning and improving. Some began to view him as a real leader, someone with vision and passion. Still, Luca couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy when he thought about the things he hadn't yet accomplished. He knew that these changes were just the beginning, and many more challenges lay ahead. One morning, after attending a meeting with the charity's partners, Luca received a letter from a board member. The letter wasn't long, but it contained an important message. "We see the progress you've made. However, there is still much to be done to ensure the charity's sustainable growth. You need to further prove your leadership and financial management ability." Luca felt a weight settle on his shoulders as he read these words. He knew he still had a lot to learn in order to meet the board's expectations. But instead of feeling discouraged, he decided to use the letter as motivation to keep going. He couldn't just do the easy things. He had to accept the challenges and work even harder. Luca began focusing on building a long-term plan, seeking potential partners to expand the charity, and improving financial management to ensure the sustainability of the charity's future projects. The following days were filled with relentless work. Luca never forgot the lessons Viviane had taught him about perseverance and dedication. Slowly, he began to see positive results from his efforts. The small projects started to expand, and the charity began to attract more attention from potential partners and donors. Though it wasn't easy, Luca could feel the change taking shape. He was starting to believe in himself and in his ability to accomplish great things. Once again, Luca returned to the area he had visited, where the poor families were receiving help from the charity. When he saw the hopeful eyes of the children and the gratitude in the mother's eyes, he knew he was on the right path. His journey wasn't over, but with each step, no matter how small, he was making a real difference in the lives of the people he was helping. Luca smiled, a sense of determination filling his heart. He knew there would be no easy road ahead, but with each passing day he felt more certain of his purpose. This life, though filled with challenges, would lead to real change if he stayed persistent and never gave up. After marrying Vivienne, Luca felt as if his life had turned a new page. He had slowly become accustomed to the work at the charity, and the small projects he started to implement were gradually showing results. He felt more confident in his abilities, and although there were still some reservations from the board members, he believed he was on the right path. However, he could never have anticipated just how quickly and abruptly his life would change. That morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the large windows of the mansion, Luca received a call from the butler. His voice was filled with concern, and the words he spoke struck Luca like a sudden blow. Vivienne had passed away. Luca froze, the phone slipping from his hand and crashing onto the desk. It felt as though time had stopped, the space around him suddenly growing cold. Though he had known that Vivienne was aging and her health was declining, he never imagined she would be gone so soon. The woman who had changed his life, the one who gave him the opportunity to not only change his own fate, but also bring change to so many others, was now gone. The wave of loss and grief hit Luca like a tidal wave, overwhelming him. He felt empty, unsure of what to do next. Vivienne wasn't just a mentor, a friend. She had been like a second mother to him. Everything he had today was because of her guidance and support. It felt as though he had lost a vital part of his life. Once the necessary formalities were completed, Luca sat in Vivienne's office, the place where she had often worked. On the large wooden desk he found a large envelope, and inside it was a letter Vivienne had left for him. His hands trembled as he opened the letter, his eyes filling with tears as he read each line she had written. "Dear Luca, I'm sure you won't easily accept my passing, but I believe you will have the strength to continue the path I've walked. You are not just the successor of this charity, you are someone who can change the lives of more people than I ever could. You have a resilient heart, and that is why I chose you. Remember, this work is not just about money. It's not about building an empire. It's about creating real change in the lives of those who need help. The projects I started were meant to serve the underprivileged, poor families, orphan children, and those without a voice in society. You must continue to develop these projects, and most importantly, protect the human values we have built. You will face many challenges, and there will be times when you want to give up. But remember that each day you work for others, you are truly creating a better world. I believe in you, and I will always be with you, though I will not be present in body. I wish you all the best on this journey, my dear Luca. Vivienne." Luca paused, unable to stop the tears as he read Vivienne's final words. Her message made the loss even more profound. Vivienne had placed her trust in him, believing he would continue the legacy she had built, and now he had to fulfill that responsibility. It felt as though the weight of everything had fallen squarely on his shoulders. This loss wasn't just about losing a woman he deeply respected, but also about the burden of the work Vivienne had left behind. He couldn't let everything crumble. He knew that if he didn't continue her work, everything she had built would fade into a distant memory. He had to protect and grow this charity for the people she had dedicated her life to helping. The next day, Luca stood in the meeting room, the place where he had worked alongside Vivienne for so long. The board members were seated around the table, their eyes fixed on him. The tension in the room was palpable, but Luca knew he couldn't let his grief control him. He had to keep moving forward for the people Vivienne had helped, for the poor families and orphan children who were still waiting for help. Luca stood up, his eyes bright despite the turmoil inside. Vivienne has passed away, but her work does not end here. We can mourn, we can grieve, but we must continue the work she started. I promise that I will not abandon this legacy, and I will continue to grow the charity with everything I have." The room fell silent. Some of the board members exchanged glances, others nodded seriously, but no one voiced any objections. Luca knew he would have to prove himself once again, not just with words, but through actions. The projects Vivian had started could not be abandoned. He had to see them through, for Vivian and for the people she had helped with her heart and soul. But for the moment, the team all broke out. "Let's leave the run," Luca said, "to tell the victims and the community for 8. Waddle." In the days that followed, Luca had little time to wallow in sorrow. He kept up with Vivian's work, reviewing each project, meeting with partners and strengthening relationships with the communities the charity was helping. He also began planning new initiatives, long-term projects that Vivian had conceived but hadn't yet had the chance to implement. Though the weight of responsibility was heavy, Luca realized that this loss had sparked a fire within him. Vivian had trusted him, and he couldn't fail her. He would continue the legacy she left behind, to help those in need, and to prove that he was worthy of her faith in him. Luca stood before the door of the boardroom, his hand tightening around his briefcase. Every meeting felt like a battle, and today was no exception. Although he had been managing Vivian's work for several months, he knew that the skepticism from the board members still loomed over him. They had never fully trusted the abilities of a young man like him, someone with little experience, especially when it came to running such a large, influential organization like this charity. Luca had grown accustomed to the sharp glances and the pointed questions that were filled with doubt every time he made a decision. But unlike before, when he'd felt anxious and uncertain, he now knew that stepping back was no longer an option. Vivian had entrusted him with a legacy, a chance to change the lives of the poor, and he wasn't about to let those promises fade into empty words. The boardroom was large and the members were already seated, their eyes betraying their skepticism. They were all seasoned professionals in both charity and business, while Luca had only recently stepped into this world, taking a huge risk. He took a deep breath, gathered his resolve, and entered the room. "Luca, we want to hear about the next steps for the charity," the CFO said, his gaze cold and unwavering, filled with doubt. "What's your plan to ensure that this charity won't face significant financial difficulties in the future? Your lack of experience is something we cannot overlook." Luca could feel the challenge in the room, the weight of their gaze. He knew they didn't just want a simple explanation. They wanted to see confidence, certainty in his decisions. Though the nerves still gnawed at him, Luca knew he couldn't let them control him. He had to prove that he was worthy of this opportunity. He opened his briefcase and pulled out the long-term plan he had spent months preparing. The figures, the specific goals, the clear development strategies. "I know I don't have many years of experience running a large charity like this one," Luca began, his voice firm, "but I believe in the work we are doing. I might not know everything right away, but I will learn, and I will never give up. Running this charity isn't just about maintaining finances, it's about bringing real change to the communities we serve." He paused for a moment, letting his words settle. "Our long-term plan will not just focus on maintenance, but on developing new projects. We'll seek strategic partners, create sustainable models so that our projects can continue without being overly dependent on outside funding. The charity must become self-sufficient, ensuring that it can operate long-term." Luca noticed the CFO's expression softened slightly, but his skepticism still lingered. "And you think these projects will yield results right away? Have you anticipated the risks?" Luca knew this was his moment to present solid arguments. "There will certainly be risks. Every decision carries some level of risk, but that's why we need a clear strategy and the ability to adapt. I've spent time studying Vivian's projects and learning from both the successes and failures of similar charity models. We need to be creative, willing to change when necessary, but always holding firm to the human values Vivian set in place." Luca looked at each member of the board, feeling the tension in the room. But he couldn't let anxiety take over. He had to show them that he was a leader with a vision. "Vivian believed in me," Lucas said, his voice filled with determination. "She entrusted me with this responsibility, and I won't let her down. I understand that this work is difficult, and I won't shy away from the challenges. If I can make this charity stronger, not just financially, but in its influence and social value, I will give everything I have." A few members of the board remained silent, but Luca could see their expressions had shifted slightly. The doubt in their eyes had softened, replaced by attention and consideration. That's what he needed, attention and respect. He didn't expect them to trust him completely right away, but at least he had proven that he was capable of leading and had a clear plan. Finally, the CFO nodded, still not fully convinced, but at least now taking him more seriously. "We will review this plan. You'll need to work closely with other departments to implement specific projects, but I must say, we expect you to prove that your determination will truly bring change." Luca exhaled with relief as the meeting ended. Though many challenges lay ahead, he had at least defended his decision and laid out a clear vision for the future of the charity. He knew the road wouldn't be easy, but without perseverance and determination, none of his efforts would matter. Lucas stepped out of the boardroom, his heart full of emotion. He had shown that he could stand strong under pressure, and he would continue to work tirelessly to build the charity for the people Vivian had devoted her life to helping, and for the legacy she had left behind. On a bright and cool morning, the new vocational training center was officially opened in the heart of the city. This was one of the major projects Luca had planned to implement when he took over Vivian's work. The inauguration of this center marked a significant milestone, not only in Luca's career, but also as a major step in continuing the legacy that Vivian had devoted her entire life to building. Luca stood on the stage, his eyes scanning the crowd gathered under the warm sunlight. The attendees at the grand opening were partners of the charity, the communities it had supported, and local residents who were eager for the new opportunities the center would bring. Large banners reading, "Opportunities for All Vivian Clark Vocational Training Center," fluttered in the breeze, clearly symbolizing the charity's commitment to offering new opportunities for those often overlooked by society. Standing at the podium, Luca felt the familiar flutter of nervousness in his chest. But it wasn't the same anxiety or uncertainty he'd felt in the early days. Now he was a true leader. The challenges he had faced and the obstacles he had overcome had helped him grow, making him more confident in his role. "Ladies and gentlemen, today is a special day for me and for Vivian's charity," Luca began, his voice strong yet laced with emotion. "Today we are not just opening a vocational training center, we are opening a new opportunity for those who need it most. This is a continuation of the work Vivian started, and I am proud to stand with all of you, our partners and allies in this mission, as we bring real change to our community." Luca paused for a moment, looking around at the expectant faces in the crowd. The eyes of the people before him filled him with a sense of respect and hope. He continued, "Vivian always believed in the potential of people. She always believed that with support and opportunity, anyone could change their life. And it is these beliefs that have guided me on this journey." Luca's gaze swept across the bright walls of the Vocational Training Center, a place where local residents would be taught the skills they needed to build a life for themselves. The center would offer courses in craftsmanship, IT, culinary arts, and other vocational skills. This was part of Luca's long-term strategy to not only provide financial support, but to create lasting opportunities for the poor and marginalized in society. "We're not just teaching trades to those in need," Luca continued passionately. "We are giving them the power to take control of their lives, the right to a stable job, and the opportunity to build a better future for themselves and their families." His voice strengthened with conviction. "Vivian laid the foundation, and I am committed to continuing what she started, not only for her, but for all the people we serve." But Luca knew his work wasn't just about providing opportunities for the poor. It was also part of a larger journey to break down the barriers of racial and social discrimination. Each day, he realized that the charity's work wasn't just about offering financial support. It was about fighting to dismantle the unjust prejudices still present in society. We cannot allow racism to persist in our community, Luca continued, his gaze becoming more resolute. The pain of those who are deemed different, who are discriminated against because of their race, religion, or origin, is an issue we cannot ignore. Vivian always believed that all people are equal in value, and our charity will continue to support everyone, regardless of who they are, so they can build a better life based on their talents and abilities. Luca remembered his visits to impoverished communities, where racial discrimination still ran deep. He recalled the stories of families, especially people of color, who had been abandoned by society, denied education and jobs simply because of their skin color. These stories pained him, but they also fueled his determination. We cannot change the world simply by talking, we must act, Luca said, his voice ringing out with power. We must ensure that every person, whether they are white, black, or of any color, has the opportunity to learn, work, and live in a fair society. His voice resonated with passion. The price of justice is perseverance and determination. And I promise you, our charity will not just continue its philanthropic work, it will be a strong voice against racism. Below, the crowd, from partners to families in need, felt the energy and resolve in every word Luca spoke. He wasn't just talking about changing the lives of those left behind. He was committing to fighting the prejudice and discrimination that had lingered too long in society. Today is an important day, Luca added, his gaze becoming more determined. And it is only the beginning. This center will not just be a place to learn trades, it will be a source of inspiration for anyone seeking opportunity. We will expand our training programs, create more job opportunities, and continue supporting projects that help communities thrive. We will keep pushing forward so that people not only have jobs, but also belief in their future. Luca took a deep breath, feeling a sense of hope and new opportunities unfolding before him. We are building a stronger community, a more just society, where everyone has the chance to grow and overcome poverty. This is the change Vivienne started, and I promise you all that I will not stop. Finally, Luca ended his speech with a heartfelt thank you. Thank you for your trust and support. We've come a long way together, and I believe what we will do next will be even greater. The change has begun, and we will continue to make this world a better place. As Luca stepped down from the podium, a wave of applause erupted from the crowd, a unified response that he had never felt so clearly before. The participants of the inauguration, from partners to families in need, could feel the passion and determination in every word Luca had spoken. Walking outside, Luca looked at the new vocational training center where opportunities were just beginning to take root. He felt the transformation not just within the walls of the center, but also in the hearts and souls of those who had come to participate. Each step in the charity, every new project, was a continuation of Vivienne's legacy, a confirmation that, even though she was no longer here, what she had created would live on. Luca knew the road ahead would still be full of challenges, but now he no longer felt alone. He had grown, he had confidence in himself, and he would continue down Vivienne's path, bringing hope and opportunity to the people she had selflessly helped. The future was wide open, and Luca was ready to lead the charity to new successes, ensuring that Vivienne's legacy not only endured, but flourished. Hit the subscribe button and don't forget to leave a comment so I can hear your thoughts and suggestions for future videos.